The world blinked and Lou Paisley found herself in an endless Victorian hallway. It stretched impossibly far in both directions. 12 doors lined the corridor, each marked with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when she wasn't looking directly at them. The wallpaper was a deep burgundy with golden patterns that hurt to focus on, and the air smelled of old wood and something metallic. Oh, great. Another blonde. Bet she screams at the first shadow. These influencer types never make it past door 3. Waste of time. Why are her clothes so plain? At least the last girl had style. The voices weren't coming from anywhere she could see. They were just there, in her head, like unwelcome thoughts that carried the weight of judgment. A translucent notification materialized in the air before her. Period. Welcome to the 12 doors. Survive each challenge to progress. Death means starting over. Current viewers, 847,329. Good luck, contestant 1,847. The number made her pause. 1,847 contestants before her. What had happened to the others? Finally, been waiting 2 hours for fresh meat. So might she looks boring. Generic small-town girl vibes. Calling it now, she'll cry before door 2. Calling it now, she'll cry before door 2. Pathetic. Lou examined the hallway more carefully. The floorboards creaked under her feet, but only in certain spots. The portraits lining the walls between doors all depicted the same woman at different ages, but her eyes seemed to track movement. Most unsettling of all, she could see her own footprints in the dust behind her, but also other footprints, lots of them, all heading toward the doors, but none coming back. She approached the first door. The symbol carved into its dark wood was an eye, but as she watched, it blinked. First door, Eye of the Watcher. Classic starter challenge, she thought. She's taking forever. Just open it already, someone else said. Bet she's too scared to even touch the handle. Lou reached out and grasped the ornate brass handle. It was warm, almost body temperature, and for a moment she could swear she felt a pulse. The door swung open with a groan that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The room beyond looked like it had been lifted from a 1950s family home, complete with floral wallpaper, doilies on the furniture, and the warm glow of table lamps. But embedded in every surface, the walls, the ceiling, even the floor, were dozens of human eyes, all different colors and sizes, all very much alive. They blinked at different intervals, creating a wet, organic sound that made the air feel thick and oppressive. Some rolled in their sockets to track her movement, while others seemed to be looking at things only they could see. Classic Irem, so predictable. She's just standing there. Do something. Look how scared she is, frozen like a deer. This is taking forever. Most people at least try to solve it. But Lou wasn't frozen with fear. She was observing, cataloging details that others might miss. The eyes weren't randomly placed or moving without purpose. Some blinked in sequences. She counted patterns of 3, 5, and 7. Others tracked specific objects in the room. The grandfather clock whose hands moved backward. The family portrait where the subjects' faces were slightly blurred. The flowered armchair that was the only piece of furniture without eyes embedded in it. A voice echoed from hidden speakers, distorted and echoing. Find what doesn't belong before the watcher finds you. You have 15 minutes. As if summoned by the words, something began moving behind the walls. The sound started as a whisper, fingernails against wood, but grew louder and more insistent with each passing minute. It's always the clock. These newbies never figure it out. Or the painting. Check the painting, dummy. She's still just standing there. What an idiot. The scratching is getting louder. She's running out of time. Lou spent several minutes just watching the eyes, noting their patterns. She realized that most contestants probably panicked and started checking the obvious anomalies immediately. The backward clock, the blurred portrait, the various decorative items scattered around the room. But she had noticed something else. 3 eyes near the family photo blinked frantically whenever she approached a specific section of the baseboard. But they stopped blinking when she looked directly at them. only resuming in her attention was elsewhere. It was as if they were trying to guide her while avoiding detection. The scratching behind the walls grew louder, more urgent. She could see claw marks beginning to appear on the wallpaper. 10 minutes left, and she's still just staring at the floor. This is painful to watch. The watcher's gonna get her for sure. Lou knelt where the three eyes had been indicating and ran her fingers along the baseboard. The wood felt different here, newer, less worn. Hidden in the shadow, where the baseboard met the wall, she found a small lever, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. She pulled it. The scratching stopped immediately. All the eyes in the room blinked once in unison, then went still. The oppressive feeling lifted, and a door appeared in the far wall, where there had been only blank wallpaper before. Wait, what? How did she? She found the hidden trigger, but nobody checks the baseboards. Lucky guess. Has to be. That was actually smart? Weird. As she walked toward the newly revealed door, Lou noticed that the three helpful eyes followed her movement and seemed to wink, though that might have been her imagination. The second door was marked with a twisted spiral that seemed to draw the eye inward, creating a hypnotic effect that made her feel slightly dizzy. The door opened onto what appeared to be a small-town sheriff's office from the 1980s, complete with wood paneling, harsh fluorescent lighting, and the smell of stale coffee and old cigarettes. Behind the desk sat a man in uniform, but something was off about him. His face was too symmetrical, like a computer-generated image that hadn't quite achieved reality. His eyes moved just a fraction too late when following objects, and when he breathed, his chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. Sheriff Thompson challenge. This is where they usually break. Authority figure submission test. She looks like the type who'll fold immediately. Boring. Wake me when she starts crying. Look at her just standing there. No backbone at all. Ma'am, the sheriff said, his voice carrying an odd electronic undertone that seemed to come from speakers rather than his throat. We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. I'll need to search your belongings and ask you some questions about your whereabouts. This was clearly a psychological test designed to gauge response to authority. Most contestants would either comply meekly, hoping submission would lead to safety, or try to fight back, which usually ended badly. The sheriff's posture suggested he was prepared for both responses, but Lou had noticed several inconsistencies that others might miss. The sheriff's badge number changed every time he turned away from her. Sometimes it read 1247, sometimes 1274, sometimes 1742. His nameplate clearly read Thompson, but the framed commendations on the wall behind him were all made out to an Officer Rodriguez. Most tellingly, his shadow fell in the wrong direction relative to the light source. She's not responding. Is she broken? Just submit already. The sheriff always wins this one. Oh, bro, sorry I have to miss that. Instead of doing either, Lou sat down in the chair across from his desk and pulled out a notepad that materialized in her hand. Apparently the game provided tools when needed for challenges. Of course, Sheriff Thompson, she said calmly, making a show of preparing to write. But first, as you mentioned reports of suspicious activity, I'll need some information for my records. Could you provide me with the complainant's name and contact information? The sheriff's too-perfect face flickered with confusion. The complainant, well, that's confidential information. I understand the need for confidentiality, Lou interrupted smoothly. But as the subject of the investigation, I have certain rights. I'll also need your badge number. I notice it's been changing, so I want to make sure I record the correct one, and the specific nature of the alleged suspicious activity. The sheriff looked down at his badge, then back at her, his expression cycling through confusion and what might have been panic. My badge number it's also, Lou continued, consulting her notepad. I notice your commendations on the wall are made out to Officer Rodriguez, but your nameplate says Thompson. Was there a name change? Marriage, perhaps? I'll need documentation of that for chain of custody purposes. The sheriff began to stutter, his form glitching like a broken video. His movements became jerky, unnatural. The reports. Rodriguez was my partner. My badge is... And finally, Lou said, standing up and pointing to the window, your shadow is falling toward the light source, rather than away from it, which suggests either supernatural intervention or a significant flaw in the scenario construction. Phrase, the sheriff's form began to pixelate around the edges. With a sound like static electricity, he vanished entirely. The harsh fluorescent light softened, and the back wall dissolved like mist, revealing the third door. Hey, she completely dismantled him. And then she turns to the next page. With a sound like static electricity, he vanished entirely. Hey, that was actually impressive. A third door bore the symbol of a broken chain, its links scattered as if they'd been shattered by some tremendous force. The door opened onto what looked like a child's bedroom, but everything was wrong in ways that seemed designed to create maximum psychological discomfort. The teddy bears sitting on the shelves had too many eyes. Some had 4. Others had 6. And one enormous bear in the corner had dozens of eyes, covering its entire surface like a patchwork quilt of surveillance. The alphabet blocks scattered on the floor spelled out words in languages that hurt to read. Not because they were in foreign scripts, but because looking at them too long gave her a headache and made her vision blur. It played what should have been a soothing lullaby, but when she listened carefully, she could hear that it was actually the same melody played backwards, creating a sound that was almost, but not quite familiar, like a half-remembered nightmare. Personal trauma room? This is where they always break? Finally, some real psychological horror. She looks shaken. About time. This room is designed to trigger childhood fears. Nobody gets through it unscathed. Sitting in the rocking chair in the corner was a figure that made Lou's hands shake, not with fear, but with a complex mixture of anger, grief, and old pain. The figure looked like someone from her past, someone who shouldn't be there, someone whose presence in this place felt like a violation. The figure stood up slowly, creaking the floorboards in a rhythm that was achingly familiar. When it smiled, the expression was perfect, too perfect, like a photograph rather than a living expression. She's shaking. Finally, a normal reaction. The trauma manifestations always work. This is more like it. Let's see her break down properly. But instead of breaking down or running, Lou stepped closer to the figure. She studied it with the same analytical attention she'd given the sheriff, looking for inconsistencies and flaws. The figure's left hand was perfect. No scars, no calluses, no signs of the life it was supposed to have lived. The breathing was too regular, mechanical, like the sheriff's had been. Most importantly, it smelled wrong. Not the mixture of cigarettes, cheap perfume, and desperation that the real version would have carried, but something antiseptic and artificial. "You're a poor copy," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. "The details are wrong. You're nothing but a collection of assumptions and guesses." She reached past the dissolving figure. It had started to fade the moment she called it out, and found a key with the number 3 etched into it, sitting on the rocking chair seat. That was unusually fast. Most people spend at least 20 minutes sobbing in the trauma room. How is she immune to psychological manipulation? She saw through it immediately. That's not normal. The 4th door was marked with a grinning skull, whose eye sockets seemed to follow her movement. It opened onto what appeared to be a high school cafeteria, complete with long tables, harsh fluorescent lighting, and that distinctive smell of industrial food and cleaning chemicals. 3 other people were already there, 2 men and a woman, all looking confident and experienced in a way that made it clear they'd been through this before. Multiplayer room. Finally, some real competition. Sarah's going to destroy this newbie. Some people are going to get eaten alive by the veterans. This is where we separate the real players from the tourists. "Oh, great," said the woman, rolling her eyes with theatrical disgust. She had short black hair, cut in a severe bob, and moved with the aggressive confidence of someone used to being in charge. Another tourist who thinks this is a game. Okay, the first man was tall, with intricate sleeve tattoos that seemed to move in the fluorescent light. He barely glanced at Lou when he spoke. "Marcus, door 7 veteran. Sarah here cleared 9 doors on her last run. Tom over there made it to door 8. You?" The 3rd member of their group, older, with graying hair and tired eyes, looked up from where he'd been examining the cafeteria walls. "Let me guess. First timer? I'm Lou." "This is my 4th door," All three of them laughed, but it wasn't friendly laughter. It was the kind of laugh people make when they think they're about to watch someone embarrass themselves. Fourth door? She's definitely lying. Look how calm she is. Nobody stays that composed on door 4. The real players know what they're talking about. She's about to get schooled. This should be entertaining. Sarah stepped forward, clearly establishing herself as the leader. Listen, newbie, the multiplayer challenges aren't like whatever easy rooms you stumbled through to get here. This requires actual skill and experience. Try not to get us all killed with your incompetence. Before Lou could respond, the room began to change. The fluorescent lights flickered and dimmed, and water started pouring from hidden vents in the ceiling. The water was cold and rose quickly, already reaching their ankles within the first minute. Classic cooperation test, Sarah announced, immediately taking charge with practiced efficiency. The exit mechanism requires teamwork, and we're on a timer. Marcus, check the high shelves for tools. Tom, examine the wall panels for hidden switches. New girl, just stay in the center and try not to drown. Smart leadership. Keep the liability away from anything important. Sarah knows exactly what she's doing. This blonde is gonna panic the second the water hits her chest. Watch the professionals work. As the water continued to rise, now at knee level and climbing steadily, Marcus was methodically checking the upper shelves of the cafeteria, finding various tools and objects that might be useful. Tom was running his hands along the walls, looking for hidden switches or panels. Sarah was coordinating their efforts while keeping one eye on the water level. But Lou had noticed something the others were too busy to observe. The water wasn't rising randomly or evenly. It was flowing in specific patterns, following channels that had been carved into the floor, but were only visible once they were submerged. The flow created currents and eddies that seemed almost intentional. She's just standing there doing nothing. At least look like you're trying to help. The water's up to their thighs now. This is getting serious. Found something, Marcus called out, holding up what looked like a complex key. But there's no lockup here that matches it. Keep looking, Sarah ordered. Tom, anything on the walls? Lots of panels, but they're all fake, just decoration. The water reached waist level. Lou could see the others starting to show signs of real concern. Their movements became more frantic, their voices tighter. Without a word, Lou took a deep breath and dove under the rising water. Is she drowning herself? What is she doing? Sarah's going to be so mad if the noob dies and ruins their run. This is embarrassing. She's completely lost it. Underwater, Lou could see the carved channels clearly. They formed a complex pattern that flowed toward a central drain, but the drain was covered by a false floor panel that was nearly invisible from above. The currents were all pointing toward it, like arrows saying, "Here, this is important." She pried at the panel with her fingernails, her lungs already starting to burn. The false floor was heavier than expected, requiring real effort to shift. Just as she was starting to see spots from lack of oxygen, it gave way. The water began to drain immediately, creating a whirlpool effect that was both dramatic and effective. When Lou surfaced, gasping and coughing, the other 3 players were staring at her with expressions ranging from surprise to grudging respect. "How did you know to look under the water?" Tom asked, genuinely curious now rather than dismissive. Lou wiped water from her eyes and pushed her wet hair back. The flow pattern was wrong for random flooding. It was too organized, too purposeful. The currents were trying to show us something. "Okay, that was actually smart," Tom admitted. She read the water flow like a map. "Maybe she's not as useless as she looks," another player remarked. "Still probably got lucky, but impressive luck." Sarah's expression had shifted from dismissive to calculating. That was good observation. "Maybe you're not completely hopeless." Marcus nodded approvingly. Pattern recognition. That's a useful skill in the later doors. The 5th door led to what looked like an abandoned high school hallway that stretched much further than any real hallway should. The lockers lining both walls were breathing, their metal surfaces expanding and contracting in a rhythm that was almost but not quite like human respiration. Something was scratching frantically from inside most of them, creating a cacophony of desperate sounds. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered in patterns that hurt to watch directly, and the linoleum floor was covered in a thin layer of what might have been water, but reflected things that weren't there. Nightmare scenario. This is where teams usually fall apart. The lockers contain psychological triggers. One wrong choice and you're mentally broken. Watch the real players handle this professionally. The newbie's going to mess this up for everyone. Marcus surveyed the hallway with the practiced eye of someone who'd survived worse. Nightmare scenario. Everyone stays in formation. No one opens any lockers until we identify the pattern. These things are designed to trigger specific fears. Sarah nodded, taking her position at the front of their group. Standard formation. I'll lead. Marcus takes the rear guard. Tom scouts for environmental hazards. New girl stays in the middle where she can't cause trouble. Perfect strategy. Protect the weak link. Sarah's formation sense is flawless. Why does the blonde keep looking around like that? So twitchy. But Lou wasn't being twitchy. She was cataloging details that the others were too focused on the obvious threats to notice. Among all the scratching and breathing, there were subtle differences. Most of the lockers were making desperate, panicked sounds, but 3 of them were completely silent. More importantly, the flickering fluorescent lights dimmed noticeably whenever someone walked past those 3 silent lockers. The team moved slowly down the hallway in their careful formation. Marcus kept watch behind them for any threats that might emerge from lockers they'd already passed. Tom checked the floor and walls for traps or environmental hazards. Sarah maintained their forward progress while keeping everyone organized. But as they advanced deeper into the hallway, Lou began to slip away from the formation, drawn toward the silent lockers. "Hey," Sarah hissed, her voice sharp with authority and irritation. "I said stay with the group." These challenges are designed to pick off isolated individuals. She's gonna get them all killed. Why do the noobs always think they know better than the veterans? This is exactly why team challenges are so frustrating. The professionals are trying to keep her safe, and she's being stupid about it. But Lou had reached the first silent locker. Unlike the others, its surface wasn't breathing, and there were no sounds of distress from within. When she opened it carefully, she found it contained a key, a working flashlight, and a note written in what looked like dried blood. "The exit is where the noise stops." She quickly checked the other 2 silent lockers, finding similar supplies and additional notes that formed a complete message when read together. "The exit is where the noise stops. Trust the silence." The screaming is meant to distract. She's collecting items while the others are focused on threats. Those supplies could be crucial later. Maybe the screaming lockers are just distractions? Wait, is she actually solving this correctly? Meanwhile, the rest of the team had been forced to deal with actual threats. They'd reached the end of the hallway where a massive steel door blocked their path. The door had 4 keyholes, which meant they needed 4 keys, which meant they had to open 4 lockers and deal with whatever psychological horrors waited inside. "Great," Tom sighed, looking at the door with resignation. 4 keys, 4 players. The keys are hidden in the lockers, which means we each have to face our personal nightmare scenario. Sarah cracked her knuckles, preparing for battle. "I'll take point. Marcus, you're with me on the left side. Tom, you and the newbie take the right side lockers. Here we go. Time to see what these players are really made of." The nightmare lockers are brutal. Even the veterans struggle. This is where we separate the strong from the weak. But before anyone could move toward the breathing, screaming lockers, Lou stepped forward and inserted one of her keys into the steel door. "Where did you get that?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp with surprise and suspicion. "One of the silent lockers," Lou replied simply. "Which locker? How did you know it was safe? The silent ones could have been the most dangerous." Lou didn't elaborate, but she could see the others exchanging glances. They spent the next 30 minutes fighting through genuine nightmare scenarios in the remaining lockers. Marcus was attacked by textbooks with teeth that tried to rewrite his memories. Sarah faced down a gym teacher made of rusty metal who criticized every choice she'd ever made. Tom barely escaped a janitor's closet that filled with the voices of everyone who'd ever been disappointed in him. Each of them emerged with a key, but also with psychological wounds that would take time to heal. They were bloody, shaken, and emotionally drained. "How did you know?" Sarah asked Lou as they stood before the now unlocked door. Her voice had lost its dismissive edge and carried a note of genuine respect. "How did you know which lockers were safe?" "The note said the exit is where the noise stops," Lou replied. "I looked for the silence." She solved the puzzle while they were fighting monsters. Pattern recognition again. She's really good at seeing what others miss. The veterans are starting to respect her. Maybe she's not as lucky as we thought. The sixth door opened onto a vast library, with shelves stretching impossibly high, filled with books that seemed to whisper to each other when no one was looking directly at them. The air smelled of old paper and something else, something organic and slightly sweet, like flowers left too long in water. But before they could begin exploring, a new voice echoed through the space, different from the automated announcements they'd heard before. This voice had weight and authority, the sound of someone used to being obeyed. "Attention players. Due to irregular gameplay patterns and unprecedented problem-solving approaches, we are implementing adaptive assistance protocols. Please remain stationary while companion guides are instantiated." Manual intervention. Finally, someone stepped in to balance things out. "That blonde's been too lucky. Time for some real guidance." And the system must be struggling to keep up with her unconventional solutions. 4 figures materialized beside them, shimmering into existence like mirages becoming solid. They were tall, attractive people with kind eyes and gentle smiles that seemed calculated to inspire trust. They looked like every wise mentor from every story ever told, the perfect combination of competence and compassion. "Hello, players," Lou's assigned guide said, his voice warm and reassuring. "I'm David. The challenges ahead are particularly complex and dangerous. You'll need careful guidance to navigate them safely." The other 3 players seemed genuinely relieved to have expert help. Sarah immediately began asking David tactical questions about the library's layout. Martis started coordinating with his guide about potential threats. Tom began discussing strategy with his assigned mentor. But Lou was studying David with the same careful attention she'd given everything else that seemed too good to be true. His clothes were perfectly fitted and showed no signs of wear. No wrinkles, no stains, no indication that he'd ever actually lived in them. His smile never wavered, not even slightly, regardless of what was happening around him. And most tellingly, he kept glancing at spots just over her shoulder, as if reading information displayed where she couldn't see it. She's being paranoid about her helper. So ungrateful. The guides are there to help. Why is she being weird about it? Classic newbie mistake, not trusting the experts. The other players are smart to listen to their guides. "This library contains manifestations of human fears," David explained to the group, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "Each book represents a different nightmare scenario. To progress, you must each select one book and face the fear within. But don't worry, I'll help you choose the most appropriate challenge for your skill level." He led Lou to a section of shelves filled with thin volumes, their spines labeled with simple, straightforward fears. "For someone at your experience level, I recommend starting with something manageable." He pointed to a book titled Fear of the Dark. "This scenario is well suited to beginners. It will provide a growth experience without overwhelming you. Smart guidance. Start her with something easy. The guides know what they're doing. She should listen." "And the Fear of the Dark is a classic starter nightmare. Good choice." Lou nodded and accepted the book, but she'd noticed something David hadn't intended for her to see. When he gestured toward the beginner section, his reflection in a nearby mirror had moved a split second too late, as if his image was being processed by a computer rather than produced by natural light. While David was distracted, his eyes unfocused in the way that suggested he was receiving instructions from elsewhere, Lou quietly selected 4 additional books from different sections of the library. She grabbed Fear of Drowning from the intermediate section, Fear of Abandonment from the advanced area, Fear of Failure from what appeared to be an expert-level collection. And finally, one book whose title was written in symbols that seemed to shift and change when she tried to focus on them. What is she doing? That's not the plan, says Molly. She's going to overload the system with multiple scenarios? David, stop her before she breaks everything. Multiple fear scenarios simultaneously? That's insane. When the group prepared to open their carefully selected books, 3 players faced single, manageable fears in controlled environments. Sarah confronted a scenario about public speaking that challenged her need to always be in control. Marcus dealt with a fear of inadequacy that forced him to examine his self-worth beyond his accomplishments. Tom faced a fear of abandonment that was painful but ultimately therapeutic. Lou opened 5 books simultaneously. Reality exploded. The world became a kaleidoscope of overlapping nightmares that defied description. Lou found herself simultaneously drowning in an endless ocean while the water itself screamed with the voices of everyone she'd ever failed, stumbling through absolute darkness that whispered accusations about her worthlessness, watching everyone she'd ever cared about walk away in slow motion while explaining in detail why she wasn't worth staying for, failing test after test in an infinite classroom where the questions changed faster than she could read them, and standing in a place that existed between spaces where geometric impossibilities with too many angles called her name in voices like breaking glass. The other players were screaming at her from what felt like a great distance, their voices distorted by the chaos. What is happening? Failing test after test. The system is completely overloaded. P.S. She's broken everything. The scenarios are bleeding into each other, and multiple simultaneous fear exposure should cause immediate psychological breakdown. David was flickering like a television with bad reception, his perfect face cycling through error messages in multiple languages. His voice became a mechanical stutter. You cannot. Processing error. The human mind is not designed to. Multiple scenario overlap will cause permanent psychological damage. System integrity compromised. The comment stream became a torrent of panic and confusion. This isn't supposed to be possible. Look at the other players. They're terrified, just watching her. She should be catatonic by now. How is she still standing? But through the chaos, Lou was doing something that shouldn't have been possible. Instead of breaking down under the overwhelming assault of fears, she was processing them, sorting through them like files in a cabinet. She treated each fear not as a reality to be survived, but as a puzzle to be understood. The drowning wasn't about water. It was about being overwhelmed by responsibilities and expectations. The darkness wasn't about absence of light. It was about uncertainty and the unknown. The abandonment wasn't about being alone. It was about the fear that love was conditional. The failure wasn't about inadequacy. It was about perfectionism and the impossibility of meeting unrealistic standards. And the impossible geometric space, that was just the game itself, revealed without its disguises and illusions. One by one, she dismissed the artificial constructs and kept only what belonged to her, the real fears, the ones that had shaped her, the ones she'd already learned to live with. When the chaos settled, she was standing in the library again, but now she could see it for what it really was. The shelves were still there, but she could also see through them to the underlying structure. Cameras, monitoring equipment, computational arrays processing psychological data. The other 3 players were staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Sarah's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by something approaching religious fear. Marcus looked like he was reconsidering everything he thought he knew about the game. Tom was backing away from her slowly, as if she might be contagious. She integrated multiple fear scenarios simultaneously. That should have killed her. At minimum, permanent psychological damage. OP. She's not just immune to the challenges, she's turning them into tools. What is she? David was crumpled in a corner, his handsome face displaying cascading error codes. System, integrity, compromised, manual intervention required. Subject demonstrates unprecedented resistance to psychological manipulation protocols. 8 more doors had become visible, no longer hidden by the library's illusions. They stretched away into the distance, each one more complex and dangerous than the last. Sarah found her voice first, though it shook when she spoke. You're not human. I don't know what you are, but you're not playing the same game we are. And then Sarah said, she's right. Normal people don't integrate trauma like that. She turned psychological torture into a learning experience. The other players are completely outclassed. This is beyond skill. This is something else entirely. Lu looked at her teammates, then at newly revealed doors, then at the monitoring equipment now visible through the dissolving illusions. The game isn't what you think it is, she said quietly, and neither am I. The seventh door was marked with a swinging pendulum that moved hypnotically back and forth, even though there was no mechanism visible to power it. The door opened onto what appeared to be a courtroom, but one designed by someone who had only heard courtrooms described secondhand. The judge's bench was impossibly tall, requiring the occupant to look down at everyone else like a disapproving giant. The jury box was filled with 12 versions of herself, different ages, different clothing, different expressions, but all unmistakably her. They represented different choices she might have made, different paths her life could have taken, and they all stared at her with accusing eyes that held the weight of judgment. The judgment room. This breaks everyone eventually. She's going to have to face every mistake she's ever made. Finally, something that might actually challenge her. Even she can't logic her way through personal accountability. The judge was a towering figure in black robes, whose face was a mirror that showed her own features but distorted. Older, more bitter, marked by disappointment and failure. When the judge spoke, it was with her own voice, but colder and more critical than she'd ever heard it. "Lu Paisley," the judge intoned, the words echoing in the impossible acoustics of the chamber. "You stand accused of wasted potential, selfish choices, failure to live up to your responsibilities, and the cardinal sin of thinking you're better than everyone else. How do you plead?" The jury of herself began reciting her failures in unison, their voices creating a haunting chorus of self-recrimination. They spoke of every time she'd given up when things got difficult, every person she'd let down when they needed her most, every opportunity she'd wasted because she was too afraid or too proud to take the risk. This is it. This is where she breaks. Nobody can face themselves honestly and survive intact. She's been lucky so far, but this is different. This is personal. Look at her face. She's finally scared. Lu stood in the defendant's box for a long time, listening to the litany of her failures. The jury was thorough. They knew every mistake, every moment of weakness, every time she'd chosen the easy path over the right one. Some of the accusations were accurate, others were exaggerated, and a few were completely fabricated. But all of them carried the weight of possibility. They were all things she could believe about herself. For nearly 20 minutes, she just listened. The comments grew restless. Why isn't she defending herself? Why isn't she standing there taking it? Maybe she's finally overwhelmed. Even she has limits, apparently. But Lu wasn't overwhelmed. She was learning. Each accusation taught her something about the nature of self-judgment, about the difference between honest self-assessment and destructive self-criticism. The jury wasn't trying to help her grow. They were trying to tear her down. Finally, she walked calmly to the defendant's table and sat down. "I plead guilty to being human." The judge leaned forward, its mirror face reflecting her own features back at her with cold disapproval. "That is not a recognized plea in this court." "Then let me explain my reasoning," Lu replied, standing to address the jury of herself. "Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I wasted opportunities. Yes, I let people down. But every person in that jury box represents growth. Every failure you're listing is a lesson I learned, a choice that taught me something important about myself and the world." She turned to face the judge mirror. "You're not showing me my failures to punish me. You're showing me my journey. Every mistake in that jury box is proof that I kept trying, that I continued to engage with life even when it was difficult. The alternative to making mistakes is to never attempt anything meaningful at all." The courtroom began to shift around her, the impossibly tall judge's bench shrinking to human proportions. The accusing jury transforms into different versions of herself, not failures, but growth stages. "I don't plead guilty to my mistakes," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I take responsibility for them. There's a difference between guilt and accountability, between shame and learning. You want me to be crushed by what I've done wrong, but I choose to be strengthened by what I've learned. The mirror judge's reflection began to change, showing not disappointment, but something approaching understanding. The courtroom dissolved around her, revealing a simple room with a table where a key marked with the number 7 waited. She turned judgment into self-acceptance. That's not how the judgment room works. It's supposed to destroy self-esteem. She reframed the entire scenario from punishment to growth. I've never seen anyone do that before. The 8th door bore the symbol of an Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, and opened onto what appeared to be an endless white corridor lined with doors. Each door was numbered in sequence: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then the sequence repeated: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Over and over, stretching into infinity. The loop room. This is where most people give up. The infinite corridor is designed to create despair. You're supposed to realize the futility of progress and accept defeat. She's been lucky, but infinity breaks everyone. Lou began walking down the corridor, her footsteps echoing in the white space. The first set of doors looked identical to the ones she'd already passed through. Door 1 had the eye symbol, door 2 had the spiral, door 3 had the broken chain. But as she continued walking and the numbers repeated, she noticed subtle differences. The second set of door 1 had an eye, but this eye was crying. Door 2 had a spiral, but this spiral was broken in several places. Door 3 had a broken chain, but the chain was mended with golden thread. The third repetition showed even more changes. Door 1's eye was closed in peaceful sleep. Door 2's spiral had become a simple circle. Door 3's chain was whole and strong, forged from something that looked like starlight. What is she seeing that we're not? Most people get trapped in the first repetition and never notice the changes. She's been walking for 30 minutes. Doesn't she understand it's infinite, period, and then she gave up? Lou continued walking, watching the doors evolve with each repetition. She understood now that this wasn't an infinite loop, it was a spiral. Each repetition represented growth, change, the possibility of doing better the next time. The challenge wasn't to escape the corridor, but to recognize that repetition could be transformation. After an hour of walking, she reached a section where the corridor finally ended. There, at the terminus that shouldn't have existed in an infinite space, stood a door marked with the number 8 and an Ouroboros symbol. But this Ouroboros had a small gap between its mouth and tail, representing the break in the cycle. The door that ended the loop. How did she find the exit? The infinite corridor is supposed to take hours if people find the exit at all. She saw through the illusion of futility. Most people give up after the first few repetitions. A 9th door showed a cracked mirror and opened onto a room that was more concept than space. Every surface was reflective, mirrors of every size and shape, polished metal panels, still pools of water. Even the air itself seemed to shimmer with reflective properties. But each reflection showed something different. Some mirrors showed her as a child, wide-eyed and curious. Others showed her as an elderly woman, marked by years of experience and wisdom. Some reflected a version of herself that was confident and successful, wearing expensive clothes and surrounded by admiring crowds. Others showed her broken and defeated, alone in a dark room with empty eyes. The identity crisis room. This destroys people's sense of self. Which reflection is the real her? She'll go insane trying to figure out which one is true. This room has driven people to complete psychological collapse. Most contestants who reached this room became paralyzed trying to determine which reflection was real, which version of themselves was the authentic one. They would stand for hours, staring into mirror after mirror, becoming more confused and fragmented with each new perspective. But Lou understood something they didn't. She moved through the room methodically, studying each reflection not as a potential truth, but as a facet of a larger whole. The child's curiosity was real. The old woman's wisdom was something she could grow into. The successful woman's confidence was something she could develop. The broken woman's resilience was something she already possessed. Instead of trying to choose one reflection, she began gathering aspects from each: the child's wonder, the elder's perspective, the successful woman's ambition, the broken woman's strength. She understood that identity wasn't a single fixed thing, but a complex synthesis of possibilities and experiences. The room responded to her approach by changing its fundamental nature. The mirrors began reflecting not different versions of herself, but different qualities and potentials, all integrated into a coherent whole. When she looked in the final mirror at the room's exit, she saw not a single reflection, but a dynamic integration of all her possibilities, past, present, and future, unified into someone who was complete without being finished, whole without being perfect. The door marked with the number 9 materialized behind her. She integrated all the reflections instead of choosing one. Period. That's not supposed to be possible. She treated identity as a spectrum rather than a fixed point. The mirror room usually takes days to complete, if people complete it at all. The 10th door showed a tower struck by lightning and led to what appeared to be a burning office building. The heat was intense and realistic, the smoke thick enough to make breathing difficult, and somewhere in the flames, multiple voices were screaming for help. The scenario was clearly designed as a moral test. Save yourself by finding the exit quickly, or risk your life trying to help the people trapped in the building. Most contestants would either flee in panic or exhaust themselves in futile rescue attempts. The moral choice room: save yourself or save others. This is where heroes are made or broken. She has to choose between survival and sacrifice. The people screaming sound so real, so desperate. Lu moved through the burning building carefully, but not toward the exits and not toward the screaming voices. Instead, she was listening to something else entirely: the sound of the fire itself. Most people heard fire as pure destruction, crackling and roaring with mindless hunger. But Lu was hearing something different. The flames were making sounds that weren't quite random, patterns that seemed almost like communication. She found the heart of the fire, a place where the flames burned brightest and hottest. Instead of running from it, she sat down in the center of the burning room and listened more carefully to what the fire was trying to tell her. The screaming voices weren't coming from people trapped in the building. They were coming from the fire itself. Is she talking to the flames? She sat down in the middle of the fire. Is she suicidal? The heat should be unbearable. How is she not burning? What is she hearing that we can't? "You're not the disaster," she said to the flames, her voice calm despite the roaring inferno around her. "You're not destruction for its own sake. You're transformation. You're clearing away what's already dead and making space for new growth." The fire's screaming began to change, becoming something more like singing. The destructive heat transformed into something warmer and more nurturing. The burning building dissolved around her, revealing a forest clearing where new plants were emerging from rich, ash-fertilized soil. The 10th key grew from the ground like a flower, its metal warm but not burning when she picked it up. It says, she befriended the fire instead of fighting it or fleeing from it. She befriended the fire instead of fighting it. How did she know the fire was afraid, not angry? The 11th door showed an upside-down figure suspended by one foot and led to a room where gravity worked in reverse. The moment Lu stepped through, she found herself falling upward into what appeared to be an infinite, star-filled sky. The perspective shift room. Most people fight the gravity change and exhaust themselves. She's gonna fall into space forever. How do you solve a challenge when there's no ground to stand on? This is where physics becomes your enemy. Instead of panicking or struggling against the reversed gravity, Lu relaxed and allowed herself to drift upward. She understood that fighting the fundamental nature of the space would only waste energy and prevent her from seeing what the challenge was really about. As she fell slowly toward the stars, she noticed that they weren't randomly distributed. They formed patterns, constellations that told the story of her journey through the doors, but seen from a completely different perspective. From down in the normal world, the doors had seemed like individual challenges to be conquered, but from up here, falling among the stars, she could see the larger pattern they formed. The 12 doors weren't separate trials. They were parts of a single integrated learning experience. Door 1 had taught her to observe carefully. Door 2 had shown her how to question authority. Door 3 had demonstrated the importance of recognizing false representations. Doors 4 through 6 had been about cooperation, problem-solving under pressure, and learning to navigate systems designed to control her behavior. Door 7 had been about self-acceptance. Door 8 about recognizing that apparent repetition could be growth. Door 9 about integrating different aspects of identity. Door 10 about understanding transformation versus destruction. And now Door 11 was about perspective, seeing the whole system from outside its normal framework. When she reached the highest point of her upward fall, she found she had a choice. She could continue falling up into the void, effectively escaping the entire system, or she could choose to fall back down to a new door, the 11th, carrying with her the cosmic perspective she'd gained. She chose to fall back to the door, understanding that escape wasn't the same as completion, and that true wisdom came not from avoiding challenges, but from integrating their lessons. She chose to return instead of escaping into infinity. Most people either get trapped by the gravity change or flee into the void. Most people either get trapped by the gravity change or flee into the void. Most people either get trapped by the gravity change or flee into the void. The way she sees the big picture is unprecedented. The way she sees the big picture is unprecedented. Just complete and absolute void. The absence of everything. No light, no sound, no sensation, no reference points of any kind. The final test, the void room. This is where everyone fails. There's nothing to solve, nothing to fight, nothing to understand. Just emptiness. Most people go insane within minutes. She's been impressive, but nobody survives the void. Lou stepped into the nothingness without hesitation. She'd been in spaces like this before. Not literally, but experientially. She knew what it felt like when everything familiar was stripped away, when all the normal reference points disappeared, and she was left with nothing but her own consciousness. The void was terrifying not because it was evil, but because it was potential. It was the space before creation, the pause before the first word, the emptiness that existed before anything existed. Most people couldn't tolerate that much possibility. It was too overwhelming, too undefined. But Lou understood that the void wasn't the absence of something. It was the presence of everything that could be. In the absolute darkness, she began to create, not with tools or magic or special powers, but with intention and will and imagination. She created light to see by, not harsh fluorescent light like the school hallways, but warm, golden light like sunset. She created ground to stand on, not concrete or linoleum, but rich earth that felt alive under her feet. She created air to breathe that carried the scent of growing things. She created the world she wanted to exist in. She's building reality from nothing. How is this possible? The void room is supposed to be absolute emptiness. She's not just surviving the final challenge. She's rewriting it. Nobody has ever made it past the void. Nobody. When she finished, she was standing in a simple room with white walls, comfortable lighting, and a single door marked exit. But more than that, she was standing in a space that felt like home. Not any specific home she'd ever lived in, but the concept of home itself. As she approached the exit door, messages began appearing in her vision. Unprecedented achievement unlocked. First player to complete all 12 doors. Survival rate 100%. Psychological damage none. Time 11 hours 47 minutes. Status legend. She did it. She actually did it. First person in the game's history to survive all 12 doors. 11 hours? Most people don't survive the first door for 11 hours. She's not just a winner. She's the winner. Legend status. Her name will be remembered forever. The exit door opened onto a swirling vortex of light and possibility that seemed to contain all colors and no colors simultaneously. "Congratulations," said a voice, not electronic like the game announcements had been, but genuinely human and deeply impressed. "You have achieved something that was theoretically possible, but never practically accomplished. The 12 doors have been active for 7 years. testing 1,847 contestants, and you are the first to reach this moment. 7 years and 1,846 failures. She's not just a winner, she's a statistical impossibility. The one person in nearly 2,000 who figured it out. Legend doesn't even begin to cover it. What happens now? Lou asked, looking into the swirling light. Now you return, the voice replied, carrying notes of respect and even awe. Back to your life, your world, your reality. The challenges you faced here were real, but they existed in a space between spaces. You've proven something important, not just to us, but to yourself. Which is that the human mind, when it stops fighting reality and starts understanding it, when it integrates experience rather than being broken by it, when it chooses growth over safety and wisdom over comfort, it's capable of things that seem impossible. She's going to remember all of this. MP, the experience will stay with her. Happy, she solved the unsolvable puzzle. And now, she gets to take that knowledge back to the real world. The memory won't fade like a dream, the voice continued. You've earned the right to remember, to carry these lessons with you, to know that you faced the deepest challenges consciousness can devise and emerged not just intact, but stronger. Lou smiled and stepped toward the swirling light. Thank you, she said simply. No, the voice replied as she reached the threshold. Thank you. You've proven something we weren't sure was possible. You've shown that the human spirit, properly understood and fully engaged, is genuinely limitless. Lou Paisley woke up in her bed, but this time the transition wasn't jarring or confusing. She remembered everything, every door, every challenge, every moment of growth and discovery. The experience didn't fade like a dream because it hadn't been a dream. It had been something more real than reality, a journey through the fundamental structures of consciousness itself. She got up, made coffee, and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same, but she could see the difference in her eyes. A quiet confidence, a deep knowing. The look of someone who had faced the impossible and found it manageable. Her phone showed messages from friends, bills to pay, a job to get back to. Normal life resuming after what the outside world would see as a single night's sleep. But Lou knew better. She had become something unprecedented. A person who had looked into the deepest mysteries of fear and challenge and choice and had emerged with complete integrity intact. She's different now, walking taller, moving with purpose. She knows something the rest of us don't. She completed the 12 doors. She's a legend. The one person who figured out how to solve the unsolvable. Somewhere in servers around the world, her record remained unbroken. Player Lou Paisley, doors completed 1212. Status legend. Attempts by other players to match record, 23,891. Successes, 0. In online forums and gaming communities, her achievement became the stuff of legend. Players analyzed every moment of her run, trying to understand how she'd succeeded where everyone else had failed. Her methods were studied, her choices dissected, her responses to each challenge examined from every possible angle. But the real secret couldn't be captured in guides or tutorials. What Lou had demonstrated wasn't a set of techniques that could be taught. It was a way of being that had to be lived. She had shown that when you stop fighting reality and start understanding it, when you integrate challenges rather than just surviving them, when you choose growth over safety and wisdom over comfort, the human mind becomes capable of things that seem impossible. She proved it could be done. That's all anyone really needs to know. That somewhere, someone made it through. And if she could do it, maybe the impossible isn't as impossible as we think. Years later, long after the game had evolved and new challenges had been added, Lou Paisley remained the only person to have completed all 12 original doors with perfect psychological integrity intact. She never spoke publicly about her experience, never wrote guides or gave interviews. But those who knew her could see the difference. The way she handled stress without being overwhelmed by it. The way she approached problems as puzzles to be understood rather than obstacles to be feared. The way she carried herself like someone who knew, beyond any doubt, that she was capable of handling whatever life might offer. And sometimes, in quiet moments when she was facing a particularly difficult challenge in her ordinary life, she would smile and think, this is nothing compared to the 12 doors. Because once you've created light in the absolute void, once you've built reality from pure potential, once you've looked into the deepest mysteries of consciousness and emerged with your integrity intact, everything else is just practice.